Hi. About it, but this is tremendous, and I'd like to mention the great Swansea Press, the Seventh Quarry, Peter Thabit Jones's press. Also, got to get a few mentions in. The cover, which is done by David Lloyd's sister, Margaret, superb cover. The painting of the land. The book, the foreword to the book is done by Jerry Hooker, who was a lecturer of ours in Aberystwyth. I will explain the background to the book afterwards. It's dedicated to Michael Munday and his family. And Michael Munday was a lecturer in Aberystwyth who hosted us when we were there in the 70s. So how did this come about? Basically, I contacted Dave Annwn, suggesting that it would be great for us to read together. And I've always dreamt about this, reading together, especially in Aberystwyth. And David Annwn said, why not bring a book out? So I approached Peter and he said, great idea. So that's how it came about. The three of us, myself, David Lloyd, David Annwn, were in Aberystwyth together in the early 70s. We went especially to a poetry workshop quite regularly at Michael Munday, who was a lecturer there, at his house. And we were inspired also by Jerry Hooker, who was a lecturer there, and he would come along to the sessions in Michael Munday's house. So I'd like to start with a poem about Aberystwyth, which is my hometown. I was born there, as well as going to university there. I'd like to thank the editors of the anthology Afonydd for rejecting this poem, because as they rejected it, I could put it in this book. So it's really, I grew up on, if you know Aberystwyth, there's a little hill as you approach the town called Pendinas, and that's where I grew up. So this is called Between Two Rivers. I grew up on the hill between two winding rivers, the Ystwyth and Rheidol. Into the harbour where we'd scrabble after crabs or dream of stealing boats. Into Tanabwch Storm Beach. Huge boulders we'd leap like goats. Freezing waves where I learnt to swim. Places where I skimmed stones across still surface. Failed to fish with stick and string. We'd follow their wending ways on warmer days. They led me far more assuredly than parents, who were never a confluence. Those rivers held Pendinas. I touched their flowing palms. And this is a poem I do, although I'm a learner, I do try to write in Welsh. Maybe simple poems, but I'm having a go anyway. And this is a poem about the bells of Aberdyfi. Some of you may have heard about that. And this is about my family, and it was a kind of a bit dysfunctional family, as you'll gather from this poem. Clychau Aberdyfi. Atgofion clir fy neili, ger yr afon, neu ganol y dre, yn gwrando ac yn gwrando ar glychau Aberdyfi. Ond doedd dim sŵn o gwbl, dim eglwys dan y môr, dim dinas Cantre'r Gwaelod, dim brenin a dim palas. Dim ond ceg afon Dyfi, dim ond corstir a siapiau'r dŵr fel sgript yr afon yn sillafu hen ddrama. A fy nad, saithenyn modern, wastad yn gadael llifogydd I mewn, tŷ neu gar llawn a'i ddicter, Parlour fi yn dysgu ni nofio. Dim maendwr uwchben y tonau, dim ond wyneb coch a llais crelon, a cherbyd yn ei ddwylo, fel llong oedd yn suddo. Translation, Bells of Aberdyfi. I remember with my family in the town or by the river, listening and listening for the bells of Aberdyfi. But there was no sound at all, no church under the sea, no city of Cantre'r Gwaelod, no king and no palace. Only the Dyfi estuary, only the marshland, and shapes of water like a script of the river spelling out an old drama. And my father, a modern saithenyn, always letting the floods in, house or car full of his anger. How soon we learned to swim. No spire above the waves, only a red face and cruel voice, and a vehicle in his hands, like a boat that was sinking. Yeah, I should have mentioned Saithen was the gatekeeper on Cantra Gwaelod, and he's the man who let all the floods in to sink Cantra Gwaelod. This is a poem about Aberystwyth specifically, and the mile in Aberystwyth was the prom from I don't know how many people are familiar with it, but from the bar to the jetty to the harbour where they were fishing. So this is about walking the mile. And actually, if you in the museum, you see a photograph of the little paddling pool on the prom, and I think I'm in that photograph because I was there at the opening of the paddling pool. So there you go, claim to fame. Walking the mile. All along the promenade, from kicking the bar to the stacked puzzle of lobster pots, passing the empty rectangle of the paddling pool where I splashed at its opening. And that place we K-lead, swinging on wooden boards above the waves. All along the sunset and the half-beers, lonely trees, raising their branches like drinkers' arms. The old college, wrapped and scaffolded, where we sat and doted. Passing those versions of ourselves, couple in hippie garb, and bespectacled ones holding hands, looking at us as if they knew this was their futures. To return and grumble at changes, yet the same slow sundown. Walking the film of ourselves, over paving stones become shingle, pebble, with sitar and piano chords, a soundtrack to the last light lowering. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mike. That was great. I'm delighted to be here and to be reading for people in Dylan Thomas's home and for friends via Zoom back in my own country. As you might tell from my accent, I've traveled the farthest to get here to do this reading. And I know my sister Margaret, who is a poet and an artist, who created this cover image, is on Zoom, so hi Margaret. And also, Mike did a great job of acknowledging various people who have contributed to this event. I want to thank Jeff, of course, and also, though he's been mentioned, Peter Thabit Jones and the Seventh Quarry Press for all the work doing to produce this collection. I live near Syracuse, New York, and I teach at Le Moyne College for the creative writing program there. My parents emigrated from Wales, so I'll say a little bit about my connection through them and also my connection to Aberystwyth and David, Annwn, and Mike. But let me start, I'm going to read a poem, a political poem first. And Dylan Thomas, it's very inspiring to be here, you know, with all the material that he grew up with. He was a political person, if not always apparently a political poet. He was a pacifist, a socialist, and a disruptor of cultural norms. So I admire that about him. And the poem I'm going to read is titled Sick. I have to apologize, it's a bit of a rant, designed to be a rant, and it's about old men becoming dictators or wanting to, thinking a little about my own country, to be honest. So it's sick. God, how I'm sick of old men flinging fistfuls of pocket change with their profiles in high relief. Sick of their megaphone mouths, packed pogroms, frozen organs, nauseating mausoleums. Sick of flag pins, blood ties, trophy watches, palatial orgasms, private golf courses sucking water from my eyes. Sick of the dirty hands, scrubbed skinless, the fingers mining my veins, rifling my pockets, the aerosol breath, the rabid grandfatherliness, the self-portraits like smudged mirrors hung in disinfected staterooms, the deloused bedrooms of donors, always stiff, always declaring in the eye of the nuclear hurricane. Sick of Amazon warehouses of bagged and labeled body parts FedExed around the globe. Sick of filed off fingerprints, offshore ghosts, Botoxed brains, sun-drenched appetites, fairy tale accounts in real banks. Sick of fist bumps on photoshopped chests, truckloads of Novichok, the passing jab on Waterloo Bridge, the drone blitz in my backyard reception. Sick of mistresses gagged and bulldozed into unmarked graves. Sick of bleached smiles and knockoff frowns, campaigning bellies, insect instincts. The swarming mustaches, camouflaged incisors, embalmed lips, bronze-aged skin. The bodyguards at always attention, handcuffed to steel doors, so washed, so desperate to take your bullet. The desks empty as a food desert, inlaid with jawbones of journalists. No more crawling carpets. No more infected blankets gifted to the homeless. No more diamond parachutes. No more bone saws, vanishings, lynchings, choppings. Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? But I'm going to move to a poem set in Wales, maybe a couple of poems set in Wales for my next two. And one is set near the village of Carse, which is where my father grew up. It was Welsh-speaking slate mining village back then. And my mother grew up in Pontrydd Ven. I'll have a little to say about that maybe in the second half. I had a writer's residency in Carse at a place called Studio Mylor, and you could walk a beautiful wooded path to a pub called Tafarn Dwynant, which is Tavern by the Two Rivers. And it was a lovely place, lovely setting, and I went there on an afternoon and I watched some young men playing pool, what I call pool. I'm not sure what they were playing really. And they had t-shirts on with their names. They were obviously competing teams. And I had this sense of this timelessness, that in this space, there were no jobs apparently, no responsibilities, and the outside world was kept at bay. And it was very, I don't know, reassuring, I guess. So it's one of my rare rhymed poems. It's quite short. So it's Tafarn Dwynant. The boys are draining carlings as they bank and shave and plunk. Shorty, Speedog, Jesus Spider, fist bumping, high-fiving. And why not? With higher ground blasting and megaliths still hoisting capstones, the women and children evacuated, the past littered in corners, the future in the alley bin. Carry on, boys. There's no sin in lingering. The world might be limping toward fire and ice, but here the space-time vortex stalls as the cue ball rolls across freshly brushed green. And one more, also set in Wales, and at the risk of giving you a bad impression, also about a pub in Wales. I had a friend, Iwan Llwyd. He died tragically young, Welsh language poet, and he would take me to what was his local sometimes. Its name was Tŷ Uchaf, which means highest house, but also oldest house. So it's an ancient place in this particular area, an ancient inn and hotel. And it was renamed by the owner the Aberystwyth Hotel, sadly. Everyone still calls it Tydfil, because that put it first in the phone book for hotels. So it's the Aberystwyth Hotel, it's still there, but it's also, of course, Tydfil. I do mention Aberystwyth, Snowdon, but more important, I conflate figures from the four branches of the Mabinogi, the medieval Welsh tales, with figures in this bar that I witnessed. Otherwise, everything is true in the poem. So, Tydfil, Taliban for Iwan Llwyd. Highest house, oldest house, with a portal to the other world in the back room by the dartboard, where hounds with red ears and white bodies lick the floors clean. There's Gwyll juggling children by the TV, and in a corner, two ancient brothers, Nisien and Evnisien, arguing over good and evil. Around a table, farmers consider the fate of mountains. And at the bar sits that mechanic who adjusts the faces of his neighbors with invisible wrenches. Here's the landlord who swam home to minister to the thirsty, the cold, the always hungry. There's the poet who needs a room that is not his own. Tydfil by the Ogwen that shrouds its salmon from themselves, by the highway that lures the English through tunnels and tacky resorts, past speed cameras and chopped up mountains, to the trails of Aberystwyth, smiling benignly as it musters in its deepest caverns rain, fog, fire, for the day it decides to smile no more. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, David. Great reading, and thank you to Mike and to Peter here. I'm relatively simple in comparison. I'm going to read several poems about women who've been important in my life. And you know those wonderful paintings of Annunciations, Mary, the mother of Jesus, and the wonderful Annunciations. And I found it really interesting that an artist called Jora wrote an Annunciation not with some great angel coming down, but with a butterfly. And I found that really interesting. And I thought, well, you know, maybe I'll make a little puzzle of a poem and you've got to guess who the woman is. It's pretty easy, actually. But here we go. Jora painted the Virgin with a butterfly. In my Annunciation, the Great Mother, an ordinary girl with red hair, is surrounded by butterflies, alighting every now and then to feed avid and new on purple buddleia. Outside, car shadows lengthen. On the avenue, a small dog pauses, then saunters on. It must be a migration, she thinks, though the butterflies are all shapes and sizes, rising and falling, as if to bring her a message from the moist and hidden places of an empire that is not hers. She has no imagination of what the message might be. The heat presses inwards and out of her, and of the hidden baby who 70 years later will write her this poem about the inside of everything. Can I write you a bad? We've been talking about pubs. We've been talking about drinking. I don't know how many of you have had slightly too much to drink some nights. And I find that with age, I'm not looking at anyone in particular, by the way, so you can relax. I find with age, the morning after gets more difficult, so that my thought process becomes even more disconnected than usual, and all kinds of strange phrases flash through my mind. And this is a poem really about that, about the inability to cope, and plus There was a tremendous wind, a tempest going through town that night. So this is called Obad, a morning song, after high winds. And I'm sorry I can't explain it. It's just how it happened. I cannot manage the re-entry to my body, so someone does it for me. I was in some wretched market trying to buy a postcard from enemies. There are simple propositions and then there are simple prepositions. One storm has passed, another will start later. The only signs of the night are what it has left on the ground. The black TV screen could be an ancient tablet. I manage to walk to the bathroom more by instinct than memory. If you are still waiting for the poem to start, I extend my deepest sympathy. Okay, another poem for a woman who changed my life. And it's the only time I've kind of read alongside a living visual aid, and there is the dress and the discussion that Leslie wore the first night that I met her, and it's a love poem. I thought, we're in Dylan Thomas's house, we've got to have a love poem, right? And this is called For the Woman in the Grapevine Dress. You can see it for yourself. Purples and browns, the grapes red and green, the vine leaves so broad, with conifers wandering through. The vintage, London and German and Dutch, Irish with Welsh. There have been others, but this was the first dress. I say it again, with this man's thirst. And it came with your look of palest blue that emptied me of anyone but you. I'll finish with a longer one, a more confusing one, and again, there's too much wine being had. I don't know whether you've ever been in a city restaurant where there's been a graduation day going on, and it's full of people now from in Britain, in Wales, in Scotland, in all of those countries. I've experienced this with people from all around the world and their children and their families. And I don't know, it got mixed up in my head. My father makes an appearance in this. It becomes very, very incoherent. But it gets mixed up in my head with when you send away to find out your DNA. Yeah? I don't know whether you've done that. I mean, my own Welsh family have been here since 1650. In fact, in chorus, some of them. So who knows? We may be old friends, older than we know. So this changes between a normal drink in a restaurant with all these people from around the world, and it changes into the world of DNA, and it changes into flasks and bottles, and how our genes are all mixed together. So just go with it. It's a bit like a hurricane, and the hint about what's happening is the sign fine wines partway through. Graduation. Walking in the definite city, the crowds, thousands, attachments and attractions, pulling minutely, strongly, a moving mesh of animal compulsions. It is graduation day. The restaurant is bristling with their talented progeny, beautiful interlopers from all around the world. I am proud of them. This sympathy, as they are proud of them, it is natural, is it? Questions blossom in the clangour of voices here and there. Try to keep it simple, my father told me. I've tried. But it is impossible, forgive. The staircase is endless, and I am only a turn on the stairwell, a whirl in the shell. Before the statement leaves my mouth, it changes in the air. The sign says speciality wines. The mirrors reflect reflections, subtly angled spotlights. The waiters twist and wizen, attempting to dominate their given circuits. Bullfighters without cape or blade, their waistcoats pulled with tension in the buckle at the back. The Chinese table with raised hands are saying, sorry, sorry. Tables turning with glitter of crystal and glass, the spouted olive oil, the deep foghorn voice of the student saying, in maths you know what you are doing. The dragging of chairs where parties have just left. There must be somewhere left in deep space for my satellites. The waitress in training is very tall and blonde. From the Primavera, she is freshening in the breeze that blows us all through here. She won't take any nonsense and will not catch my eye and ask me for directions. We are busy, very busy, with the chromosomes and bottles, and someone in the audience says, you disappear. It is graduation day.
Well done. Your turn.
Okay.
Right, yeah, 3 more poems. When I grew up in Aberystwyth, my mother was a massive Dylan Thomas fan, and I got early memories of her in the kitchen with a Grundig tape recorder, which was on the floor. I don't know why it was on the floor. And she was intoning Fernhill into that. So that's I'm in awe really here. First time I've been here, I am in awe. So I write in 3 languages, Welsh, English and Merthyr dialect. And this is a Merthyr dialect one inspired by the American singer-songwriter Tom Waits, especially the song Cemetery Polka. Auntie Mame has gone insane, she lives in the doorway of an old hotel. In a homeless hotel, the old bouncer's on a desk. Everyone's got a story to tell, where they end up in A&E, or a lot worse, like L. Because it's Grim Reaper room service on a sly tray of pills. Ring a bell, call the cops. You'll be lucky, they're doing loads of paperwork. Used to be owned by a mayor, now keeps the undertakers busy. It's our main business after air, vapes and tattoos. Everything happens behind the blinds, the colour of spew. And you can't stop the screaming. Who's pacing them corridors, knocking on the doors, all hours? There's a snail's trail of blood on the floor. In a homeless hotel. Nobody's checking out till the sirens call. Okay, thank you. This is a poem about, I've written a lot about what's happening in Gaza, and this is about a little girl who holds a cage of a bird everywhere she goes. Just saw the film of her on television. It's called Fatima's Bird. There among the fragile homes of wood, card, nylon, is Fatima with her bird. 7 years and 7 months of never being sure. If he dies, so do I. But he has kept me alive, comes everywhere with me. She grips the cage, the bird, her heart flutters. He is her family, her friend. Perhaps he senses, shrieks at threats from above. She will never let go. Even nighttime, he's there, a guide for her dreams, a flight from her nightmares. She knows all about his cage, wishes she could open its door, let him fly free a while, like she once did, running along the beach. There, among the lost and fleeing, she sees the flames rise, then ash fall like feathers of a huge bird, scorched alive as it tried to soar. Mm. Thank you. And I'll finish with a poem about my granddaughter, and this is on the Isle of Mull. The first word that she ever said was agor. Because my son, although he lives in Glasgow, he speaks to my two grandchildren in Welsh. So Ariana said agor. The first word was agor. Agor. Her first word was agor, asking to be released from the straps, from the cot, from the buggy, through the gate, through the door, out into the open world where the mountains are waiting, where the crests and blackberries and mist grow by the stream, where the golden eagle flies out from its home in the crags, and thistle, heather and fern reach the ridge's peak. All along the open, pale sands, beyond the seaweed tide line, returning to the ocean, because that's where she came from. The call of gull-blown breeze, the ebb and flow of breathing. Thanks again. Good job, Ariane.
Thanks, Mike. Good evening once again. I'm going to read, I think, just two poems because one is a bit long and they both require a little bit of explanation. The first poem is titled Machine Gun, and when I was growing up, I desperately wanted a machine gun as a birthday present when I was a boy. A toy was acceptable, but I wanted really a machine gun. And my parents emigrated from Wales to Liverpool to Utica, and my father was a minister, he was a Calvinist Methodist, for a ethnic Welsh church in a community in Utica. So there's no way I was going to get a machine gun as a birthday present. However, a parishioner, Cyrwin Walker, is her name, took pity on me and bought me this machine gun, and I won't tell the story of my parents' reaction to it when I paraded around with this thing and unwrapped it. So I wrote a poem about the experience, and it's really about Welsh American experience, because I brought that experience of my parents' chapel life and their culture, and of course was in American culture, which is a gun culture, or in parts is a gun culture. So it's about being a boy, growing up as a boy. Machine gun. It's difficult to know the allure if you didn't watch TV, or play on my tarmac playground, or roll my yard snowmen, read my comics, or live in a home with few machines and no guns. Sleek snout, hair trigger, the rat-a-tat-tat of it, the bam-bam-bam, the Elliot Ness of its tilted grip, the Sergeant Saunders of its strap, its entire pointiness, how phantom bullets get real, blasting into fireplace bricks, spraying wallpaper, my parents' spotless bedsheets, my father's oxygen tank, my sister's boyfriend's covert back, the backboard of my brother's empty bed, shattering airplanes flying from threads and on into space. Yes, that vacuum we boys lived in. No matter where we lived or what we pretended to say or feel, our shooting for the moon that shines on each unknowable allure that boys must endure, just because we were boys in that time, in that place. And this next poem is, it's about Richard Burton. I've been writing a sequence of poems about Richard Burton, Richard Jenkins. And he, of course, I just saw Mr. Burton, which I thought was great fun and a good movie, really good movie, with all these images of Pontry de Ven. And that is the village where my mother grew up, and she knew the Jenkins family and remembered, she's passed away, toddler Richie Jenkins, following her around before she died. And I began thinking and writing this sequence of poems, I'm still working on it, so I published a few, including this one, about why some people are given a history that's remembered, and others are ignored. And normally Richard Jenkins would be ignored, the son of an alcoholic coal miner, living in a tiny village at the edge of empire, unrelated to London or New York or Berlin in the 30s and 40s. He would be forgotten. What is it that allows some people to break through? Well, it's talent, it's ambition, it's luck. So I once again went back to the Mabinogi, and the fourth branch of the Mabinogi has a story of a wizard named Gwydion who rescues a boy that has been born and rejected by his mother and by his culture where he is. And Gwydion gives him a name, cares for him, raises him, and prepares him for life, a bit like Philip Burton, I have to say, with Richard Jenkins, who ended up with a different name and preparation for life. So this poem looks at history in the context of these real people, and then feeding in figures from the medieval Welsh stories. There's a mention of a mother. It's not Burton's mother, who was, died so young. It's more of a mythic kind of mother figure. So the poem is titled History That Isn't History. The mother gives birth in a terraced house under a bridge, above a coal field, in a village remote from the epicenters of empire and the locked vaults of Threadneedle Street, and turns away from a quintessence of dust on the stone floor. Why would she not love this child? Why deny a name and armor against the whips and scorns of time? Why deny a partner? Why lead any child to the pit where yoked ponies trudge their endless nights? Why ignite a supernova in a tunnel? Why avalanche a coalface? Why cage canaries to be poisoned in the dark? Why conscript? Why scar lungs, shackle ankles before unshrouding from mist the angled valleys, hills laden with blackberries? A tale not worth the telling, as history tells. Any ash heap, any coal hearth, hovel, haphazard village, continent, any moment before or since, one lifted, one swept away, one applauded, one buried, one a puddler, one a crochet, one a miner, one the Marquis of Bute. But wait, this history isn't history. A magician, a teller of tales, chooses to see the unseen, scoops it to a pocket where its heart beats and keeps beating, secured from arrows and slings, and sings within, then sings to be heard, a winning treble in Eisteddfodau, his fast and rough hands those of a wing forward in the national game. He cries for his mother, dances on the kitchen table, walks and runs with new legs, plays the organ with quick fingers, and the mouth organ with endless breaths. He unleashes his voice to roam with sheep on Mynydd Margam. Words in air, a rare story. A child the mother refused, is loved, and blossoms between one apocalypse and the next. Between pithead and cloud, between pew and pulpit, from nowhere that anyone knows, through luck, love, magic, ambition, a name, armor, a wife conjured from meadowsweet, broom, and oak flowers. In time, petals of the enchanted life unwrap along bountiful branches for the masses to digest, or envy, or crave, or despise, or ignore in London, Hollywood, Puerto Vallarta, Seleni. All unfold their exquisite petals, all but the stone rose of that dusty floor. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Mike. I will read an angry poem about fashion. My wife is always trying to get me interested in dresses and fashion, so I will show I'm not in that way, Mike. Guys, look. This is just called Rogue Runway, and it's about the misuse, in a way, of fashion. From Kleinfeld's New York, this Nina Turner frock glitters in eyes saying yes. The buyer's neighbours are starving where her father ruled a roost, in Angola. Silk tulle embroidered with hundreds and thousands of crystals for $30,000. Tangled up in no self-awareness at a deeper level, the richest woman in Africa poses for Alta Moda di Dolce & Gabbana, where she, in her turn, spent $78,000. Back in Britannia, the Baroness launching Adore Moi, that is, and her cleavage-enhancing bras, plus a brand of fake tanning at Asda, promenades her lord's regalia, robe of scarlet wool and white miniver, while lobbying for MedPro, unsterile gowns for nurses and doctors at the height of the global pandemic. To the tune of multi-millions ferreted away in offshore havens, the oligarchs and kleptocrats of Mayfair, fake PPEs, contagion providers, proxy murderers of medical staff and patients, the cross-border industries of crypto theft. As Bowie and Grace Jones and Donna Summer used to say, this catwalk highway's not for swerving. Beep, beep, get out of my way. Yeah, all right. I don't know whether you know what a drip stand is. Sometimes people say, when you write a poem, it actually looks ahead. It's prophetic. Certainly the people that wrote the Mabinogion, some of them thought that that was the truth. I wrote this poem not knowing what havoc it was going to cause when I was introduced into hospital. Have you ever tried to take, by the way, a shower with a drip stand? It's like having someone. It's berserk. Anyway, here's a poem again that doesn't add up. Imagining that the drip stand is an alien you're stuck with, right? Earth, an etiquette guide for aliens. The hospital has been out in the tide all night, a few lights. Maternity, emergency, bereavement lounge. You could spend your whole life in here, like the guy at the airport terminal, a country in itself. At 3 a.m, the alcoholics file in, asking for pills, each with a falling story. On the hidden estates, cars glisten under a paint job of rain. I wheel the drip stand around with me like a pen friend from another planet who needs to be told discreetly but firmly that a needle in my vein isn't the same as a kiss of welcome on Earth. And to finish, taking up David's guns and maybe going in a different direction. It's a poem called Daybreak. Here it is. A little explanation is in order. We went to the church of San Francis in Cortona and saw the robe that was supposed to be his. But of course, we all know what St. Francis stood for. Brother Cat, Sister Dog, the whole board game. But as we were standing there, I kept on thinking, well, there's wars going on in the north. You know, it's peaceful in here, but there's wars going on all around us. And I remembered all the discontent in society. I grew up my father taught in an approved school. He was from Aberystwyth, but he was he was teaching in an approved school. And I met Mary Bell, remember the little girl who murdered 2 little boys? I talked with her every day for a time. So I knew all about dangerous listeners. And I knew all about people who tried to help others that seemed lost into dreadfully neurotic evil. And I finished the poem with a quotation. I always loved that idea of a poem by Giuseppe Ungaretti, which is 2 words. Millumino dimenso. Dimenso, that's the poem. And it can be translated in a myriad of ways. But what it means is I'm illuminated immensely, self-illuminated. Self-illumination of immensity floods me at dawn. The poem is called Dawn. And we saw a sculpture that reminded us of that quotation. In fact, with Ungaretti's words inscribed on them. Anyway, this one goes all over the place, so please bear with me and I'll be finishing with it so you can breathe a sigh of relief at the end of it. Daybreak, anyway, daybreak. In the church of San Francesco, Cortona, the tunic of St. Francis lit almost gold in a zone, a planet in its own atmosphere. The silence of northern war reverberates through the walls. And B.B. King at Sing Sing, here where time breathes in, remember his frightened eyes, sideways over dangerous listeners, then pours himself into each ache of notes. My beloved, bedraggled stragglers, lovers, liars, and cheaters amongst you, my words that are not mine. My family, looking after young offenders, Gwyn, Gareth, Bryn, names like satellites orbiting in others' lives. A ginger cat here, and the lady who looks after the Chiesa, stroking him or her, and a black cat intrudes, and they fight, and she shoos them out, and follows and strokes them both again outside, and speaks to them softly, brother, sister, cat, sorella. At Castiglione, after 27 years, we rediscover Romeo Mancini's statue for peace, all edges, blades, torsions, screens, 2 wars, the exposed candle, a visual quotation from Guernica and Ungaretti. And look, how above it all, the earth's soldered bubble rises still. And 1 word caught at morning. Millumino. Thank you.
Very enjoyed.
Oh,
Really?
good.
I do have a question, actually.
Yeah.
Did you collaborate over your contributions to the collection, or did you say this is what I want, like this is what or was there how much collaboration was there?
Yeah. Well, from my point of view, and I'd like to hear from David and Mike, we thought of it from the beginning as a sort of an informal collaboration, so we didn't choose each other's poems or sort of run poems by each other. But when I saw the selection, I ordered my poems in a certain way, and we sort of had Mike set up a WhatsApp so we could communicate as the project progressed. So from my point of view, it was fairly informal and yet very real, that we were keeping an eye on what each other were contributing to the book and taking Peter's thoughts as well into consideration.
I was wondering how
Yeah.
much Peter was involved in that.
Believe it or not, this was the first app I've ever been part of. I'm not even a member of my family app. I felt
Probably the last after I was.
it is, yeah, because I felt I was pestered and pestered. But no, basically, I contributed to, you know, the number of pages that ideally for me as a publisher, you know, but I let them the poets get on really with their own particular choices, and it's worked out really well, I feel, you know.
Yeah, I think we kind of agreed that there would be some about Aber or Wales, and then I think more we're gonna show the different ways that we branched out and the different forms, different kind of things that we pursued. Then really, I mean, what I tried to do with my selection was to choose, you know, one in Welsh, some haiku because I'm interested in writing haiku. Dialects, you know, the different ways I write. Then really, you know, I was thinking about that. But Aber plays a really important part for me.
I think we knew that Mike's being anchored in Aber, you're the person with the family history born there, and David and myself have solid connections that were kind of fitted around yours, I would say, because you were, you know, there.
Yeah, I think that that's absolutely right. And Peter kept it very, very open. And Mike also mentioned, well, it would be good if we could take poems which hadn't had book publication, perhaps. And that drove me back, you know, to the magazines of our youth, some of which Mike, bless him, actually produced. And so one of the poems in here, my first Aberystwyth poem, is a poem I wrote when I was 19. You know, and already
it's incredible. I wouldn't risk any of the ones I wrote to that. Absolutely no way.
So I don't know whether that kind of. I mean, I was revealed as a fantasist at 19, going all over the place. Yeah, you know. So it's a pretty wide selection. It starts rooted in Aber, but it goes into different places. In fact, one of my, sorry to talk about my poems again, but one of my poems, remember that Mike talked about Michael Monday, who gave us this wonderful, you know, he actually nurtured us as young poets and put us in contact with established poets as well, like Jeremy Hooker. And I took an essay by Michael Monday, who died when he was very young, and I turned his phrases into a poem to thank him for that. So, you know, my mind was very much on Aberystwyth and the forces that helped to create us as
I was sparked to write some poems about Aber because of this. The one about two of them really. The protest one, which I didn't read tonight, but one about a protest and my friend Tony, we were anarchists together in Aber, and the one about my grandfather who worked in the shop at the bottom of a great dark street. So, you know, I wrote those specifically because of this collaboration, this, you know, anthology.
Mike, did you want to just tell the story of the origin of it? Because the origin is really you and David, I think.
Yeah. I came up with a different title, didn't I? But I thought David's title was excellent. You know, we decided. I think Dychwelyd we were going for first of all. We returned, but I think your title was much better. Shared Origins, great title. Yeah, I'm just glad David said, you know, do a book, because this has just always been a dream of mine, really. Absolutely, you know.
And Jeremy did a wonderful introduction as well.
Oh yes, totally, yeah.
a very generous and probing introduction, I thought, you know, very appreciative. Took the time to weigh up what he saw in our writing. It was wonderful, I thought. Only the one drawback was it starts with David Lloyd. And that, you know, that made me very jealous when I read that. Very jealous.
Isn't that alphabetical? Lloyd and...
Lloyd and Annwn? No. Nice try, but...
Jeremy was very important for all of us. Jeremy Hooker, and just lives in Harris. And it's pretty amazing that we've all kept touch with him all these years. I know David was very close to him too.
Okay. Well, thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Well, thank
Thank
you.
you. It's
Jeff.
been a wonderful
Thank you.
evening.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Great,
Thanks.
really good.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Well, now it's switched off. The other thing.
Is
No, it's just an observation, really.
Still flashing.
But
How
what
proudly.
can come out of collaboration?
Pardon?
What can come out of
Yeah.
collaboration?
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I mean, the cliches about greater than the sum of its parts.